everybody, my name's Jake. I used to be a Jehovah's Witness. I'm not anymore, and so I talk about that on the channel. What the group is up to and stuff people might not know about this religion. This is a high-control, high-demand religion. The leadership have absolute authority over the group, and so my criticisms are really reserved for the leadership. I really want to make that clear. My family and many of my lifelong friends are Jehovah's Witnesses. I spent most of my life as a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm making all of these qualifications because I think that the group has just put out one of the weirdest videos they've ever made, and I'm gonna probably say some not nice things about it.
Until when, Sovereign Lord, holy and true, are you refraining from judging and avenging our blood?
It's just a little odd.
He has executed judgment on the great prostitute.
Jesus has a sword at one point.
He dismantles, destroys, and brings to nothing all who oppose true worship on earth.
There is singing. So as you can see, there's much to discuss. So if you don't know anything about Jehovah's Witnesses, just sort of see this like a travelogue through one of the weirder and more accidentally revealing pieces of video propaganda they've ever made. A dramatic Bible reading is about 50% what you probably assume it is, which is a passage of the Bible with sound effects and stuff to make it seem more dramatic, like an old radio play.
She has fallen. Babylon the Great has fallen, and she has become a dwelling place of demons.
And the rest of a Jehovah's Witness dramatic Bible reading is hard to describe. But wait, I have to describe it because that's why I'm doing the video.
Wait a little longer.
The whole thing is like a special presentation hosted by one of the governing body members. And this one is hosted by my new favorite guy, Gage Flegel. First of all, his name is Gage, and that's just the first part of his name. The last part is Flegel, which is even better. So Gage Flegel walks us through the proceedings.
The entire book of Revelation is good news for all who love and trust Jehovah. It foretells momentous events, but we need not fear them because we know that Jehovah cares for us.
We will be studying the book of Revelation and how these amazing prophecies in the Bible's most esoteric book apply to Jehovah's Witnesses, the end times, the paradise earth.
And throughout Revelation, we read of Jesus' key role in destroying God's enemies, removing our suffering, and restoring earth to a paradise.
So Gage is there to sort of contextualize the verses that are about to be read. Here's why this matters for JW theology reasons. And this production is interlaced with illustrations and graphics from the Watchtower Art Department, which are actually quite impressive and so very kitsch. So Gage kind of sets the table for us, and then they'll jump into some of the dramatic Bible reading.
And the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality with her and lived with her in shameless luxury will weep and beat themselves in grief over her when they see the smoke from her burning.
And then Gage Flegel will come back in to talk about, well, what did all that mean? How do we interpret all that as Jehovah's people?
That's good news.
I may switch to voiceover because my allergies are really bothering my eyeballs. This little audio production is impressive from an audio production point of view. Lots of different layers of sounds happening. They got the creepy prostitute laughing when they talk about the creepy prostitute.
For because of the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, all the nations have fallen victim.
The music is really incredible. It's not only underscoring the emotion of the scene that they're reading, but it's also sneaking in little leitmotifs and cues from JW songs. If you're familiar with the JW songbook, their worship hymns, you'll hear little notes of that scattered throughout, which is neat. The music is so nice that sometimes Gage Flegel just stands there and lets it play for an awkwardly long time. Did I sneak in a little awkward silent supercut after the credits of this video? Stay tuned. There's a cast of actors playing various roles in this production. Now, Watchtower doesn't have to follow union rules or anything, so they don't have credits at the end of this saying who played who, but I cover these videos a lot, so I recognize a lot of the voices here. Our narrator, of course, is Mr. William Malenfant.
But then there also are those who do the research just to make sure little details are correct, whether it be the shoes a person has on or whether he even wears shoes.
My favorite thing that he does is he gasps at the beginning of one of the verses, like he's being like called into a revelation.
I saw heaven opened.
You might need headphones for this one, but it's there. You hear that? He goes, and perhaps in that moment, Malenfant really did feel the call of the Spirit. I like that William Malenfant added that little detail. He's always thinking about things like, well, would that person have been wearing shoes in the past? Would that person have gasped when they received a revelation by Jesus Christ? David Schaefer makes an appearance.
And she has become a dwelling place of demons, and a place where every unclean spirit and every unclean and hated bird lurks.
Hated bird? Why does God hate birds? He made those things. Then I can't tell who this other guy is.
And I heard another voice out of heaven say,
Get out of her, my people, if you do not want to share with her in her sins, and if you do not want to receive part of her plagues.
Sound off in the comments if you know. It sounds like they artificially lowered somebody else's voice. I don't know why they would have done that.
But it kind of sounds like this.
I think some of these choices are a little distracting.
After this, I heard what seemed to be a loud voice of a great crowd in heaven. They said,
Praise God.
So they sing. They sing, praise Jah. It's actually pretty close to the tune of Oh Happy Day.
Oh, happy day.
I bet I can line it up.
Oh, happy day.
Then they do this scary thing that kind of makes the angels sound like robots.
The salvation and the glory and the power belong to our God, because his judgments are true and righteous.
Watchtower are very captivated by this idea of having all the angels speak out in unison. They did this in their Jesus movie that they also released at last year's convention. This one for the dramatic Bible reading is at least coherent. You really couldn't understand what they were trying to even say in the Australian Jesus movie.
Glory in the highest above to God, and on earth peace among men of goodwill.
But it's after this portion of the Bible with the singing and robot angels where we start to get into the violent Armageddon-y unpleasantness.
For the second time they said,
Praise God. And the smoke from her goes on ascending forever and ever.
Yes, praise Jah. Why?
Right, so the first time I saw this, I was so delighted and disarmed by Gage Flegel's little performance here, this jaunty orchestra conductor move he does, that I kind of didn't pay attention to what he said next. And I think we should pay attention to what he said next, because this is where we start getting into the bloodlust that Jehovah's Witnesses and a lot of evangelical doomsday group have.
Why? False religious leaders were responsible for the death of the prophets and of Jesus Christ himself.
Even though Jehovah's Witnesses talk about what a peaceful religion they are, and how they are non-combatants in war, they are actually a very extreme and violent religion rhetorically.
Notice, too, why false religion deserves such scathing judgment.
And Jehovah's Witnesses are not unique in this. This is pretty typical of evangelical Christianity and a lot of religions.
We are a peaceful people. Vengeance belongs only to God.
And by God, he will be vengeful.
The Blue Envelope channel did a really great video on that exact topic. I highly recommend Phil's video on this. It's really great.
Of course, as long as Jehovah allows human governments to rule over us, we respect them. And not all governments have actively opposed us. Still, human government itself is insulting to Jehovah.
Jehovah's Witnesses are non-violent and absolutely cooperate with the government while they're alive. For of course we find government itself insulting. The framing for this entire thing is that Jehovah's Witnesses are a uniquely persecuted religion. They're the one true religion, and so Satan has persecuted them over the centuries.
Many nations have fiercely opposed true worship. They've banned our meetings and our preaching work, imprisoned men and women, old and young, for the so-called crime of owning a Bible or talking about their God. Some of our brothers and sisters have even been tortured for their faith.
Now, it's true that Jehovah's Witnesses have been imprisoned and banned and tortured at various points in their history, and even currently in Russia, for example. But so have many religions and marginalized groups, and Jehovah's Witnesses don't care about them. For example, when Gage Flegel goes on his little tirade about how horrible false religion is, by which he means every other religion that's not Jehovah's Witnesses, Gage Flegel goes on this little screed about how false religion has corrupted and perverted and slaughtered, and one of the examples he shows shows, next to Satan and the Crusades, is a gay lady priest.
False religion has continued to mislead, to slaughter, and to corrupt the earth with her sexual immorality.
You can see the little rainbow flag there, and it's a woman, and she's wearing a cross, and Jesus didn't die on a cross, he died on a big stick. LGBTQ people are also imprisoned and treated as criminals for the very act of existing. Jehovah's Witnesses take part in this bigotry, and go so far as to say that all the gay people deserve to die. Not just gay people, all people who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses.
So God is love, but he's gonna kill billions. How's that work?
Well, it'll make sense later. But for now, let's just focus on what I was talking about earlier.
He starts using a word that I don't remember hearing a lot as a Jehovah's Witness, which is martyr.
Although those martyrs were told to wait a little longer,
it's very common for other Christian denominations to talk about martyrdom, but witnesses don't talk about this as much. But Gage Flegel specifically says that all of the Jehovah's Witnesses who have been unjustly persecuted were martyrs, and their blood must be avenged.
And avenging our blood.
So Gage Flegel is priming the audience, Jehovah's Witnesses, to really be cheering on the violent destruction that he's talking about in Revelation.
Never would we want to have any part of an organization that's doomed to destruction. Jehovah detests Babylon the Great, so must we.
One of the more unpleasant things that Jehovah's Witnesses believe, and would really rather you not ask them about, is the fact that they say that billions of people will be killed at Armageddon.
So God is love, but he's gonna kill billions. How's that work?
Well, it'll make sense later.
The world population is a little over 8 billion, so that's how many people are going to be killed in Armageddon. 8 billion people, minus around 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses. So on one hand, they're non-violent. On the other hand, they eagerly anticipate the genocide of 8 billion people, and the leadership really wants witnesses to know how much those 8 billion people deserve it.
False religion deserves such scathing judgment.
All of this hypes up a physical, violent confrontation, in which the governing body will take part. Gage Flegel, the guy giving this little presentation, thinks he will be one of these angels holding a bow or another sword behind Jesus.
So when the anointed are called to heaven, one of the first assignments is to fight. Yeah. But in heaven, we will serve along with Christ and his holy angels, waging the final war against God's enemies. We will be mighty spirit creatures, fighting alongside our warrior king, Jesus Christ.
It's very confusing, but yeah, he's saying that the governing body, when they are raptured to heaven, are going to go to a little boot camp in heaven so that they can be taught in how to fight in this grand battle against tanks and helicopters and planes. So it's just important to remember that anytime you see Gage Flegel or any of the governing body members, they think they're going to be an angelic warrior fighting the US military any day now. It's silly, but it's also very violent and weird. Throughout this, Gage Flegel is going to be really telling witnesses how much false religion deserves this, and how much the government deserves this. And we're going to be doing the destruction. One of the more visceral things that happens in this apocalyptic fantasia is Jesus is riding on a white horse in heaven, and he calls out to the birds about how they should all get excited for their upcoming meal of eating the flesh of all the people that Jesus and the governing body are going to murder in Armageddon.
And he cried out with a loud voice and said to all the birds that fly in mid-heaven,
"Come here. Be gathered together to the great evening meal of God, so that you may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of military commanders, and the flesh of strong men, and the flesh of horses, and of those seated on them, and the flesh of all, of free men, as well as of slaves, and of small ones, and great."
Cool, eat the babies and slaves too. Uh-oh, wait a minute. Slavery's gonna come back before the end? Now, why is it that Jehovah's Witnesses get yelled at for taking a blood transfusion if they need it to live, but here birds are just getting an open invitation to eat the flesh of kings and horses and slaves and children? I wonder if these are the hated birds, the birds that nobody likes, that we talked about earlier. I do just want to touch on a couple of things that Gage Flegel said that I thought were interesting, although everything that he says is kind of interesting, because it's just interesting how he says things.
Possible? Boring?
It's like, why did he say boring like that, with his whole body, really dipping down into that word?
boring?
Our just God, Jehovah, will make sure that false religion will never again defile this world and harm his loyal servants.
This time, he had perfectly good reasons for letting false religion defile the world and for people to harm his servants. He had to do that, for now, to prove a point to Satan. But he wouldn't do that again. He wouldn't do that to us twice. Next, let's just do a little anatomy of a sentence. Let's just talk about how complicated one sentence of J.W. Gobbledygook. Gage Flegel is going to say a sentence, and then I'm going to spend a long time saying why every part of it's wrong.
The destruction of Babylon the Great marks the beginning of what Jesus called the Great Tribulation.
None of that is in the Bible. Well, a lot of the words are, but adding up all of these disparate words into this sentence is bad math. And that was a bad analogy. Here's what I mean. Revelation indeed mentions the destruction of Babylon the Great, but Revelation does not contain the phrase, the Great Tribulation. The phrase Great Tribulation comes from Matthew chapter 24, but at no point does Jesus or anyone in the Bible say, first, there's this thing called Babylon the Great that I'm going to destroy. And I know that Babylon is a real place, but what I'm saying has nothing to do with the real place. It's just for fun. I'm just saying Babylon is a code for a symbolic prostitute, and what the symbolic prostitute symbolizes is all the false religions in the world. So when all the false religions in the world are destroyed, then there's going to be a vague period of time called the Great Tribulation, and then Armageddon starts after that, whenever that previous thing hits.
The book of Ezekiel foretells that the nations will attack Jehovah's people, coming like a vast army and like clouds covering the land.
This is insane. This is why JW theology requires exciting music and charts and graphs and giant Jesus with a sword. Because when you actually try and break all this down, it's totally convoluted and makes no sense.
And if you've been in the truth for a while, sometimes it's a bit hard to remember, was that what we used to believe, or is this what we believe now?
That one sentence he says is just a bunch of different parts of the Bible duct taped together. If the Bible said anything as clear as what he's saying it says, well then they wouldn't need this little Gage Flegel movie to explain everything. We only need people like the governing body to explain the Bible, because the Bible is a very interpretive text. If the book of Revelation obviously meant something, then we wouldn't need religious leaders to interpret it for us. Which you don't at all. You don't need religious leaders to interpret it for you. Just read a book, or don't. And okay, I've been talking about projection on the channel a little bit lately.
Human rulers suggest that they could rule better than the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Christ Jesus. How arrogant.
Amazing. So let's just set aside the extreme irony of this guy calling anybody arrogant. Because Gage Flegel, that's not what's happening.
That is not what is happening. That is not what is happening.
No, Gage, that's not what's happening.
Human government itself is insulting to Jehovah.
Human rulers suggest that they could rule better than the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Christ Jesus. How arrogant.
No leader has ever suggested this. That's absurd. Jesus isn't alive. He's not here. He's not running for office. He's not on the ticket. Nobody's ever sought a government office by saying, I think I can do this better than Jesus Christ our Lord. Human rulers exist because we don't have a heavenly government. I just hate that they say this. If Jehovah God had a government, the way they portray it in their publications, where there's like a floating box in the sky and a throne and Jesus' rays of sunshine are coming down on all the pandas, well yeah, nobody would bother trying to like be president, because we would just have that. We would just have Jesus as king. But he's not king. If he was, he probably would say something about all these other people saying that they're king. But of course, witnesses would say, but he is going to say that soon, very soon. He's so upset about all this false worship, and it's just in a little while, he's going to get all fed up and throw it all over with his sword. And you know what? They've been saying that for over 100 years now. Well over 100 years.
The period that began when our Lord Jesus became king in 1914.
It is now 2025, 100 years after 1914. Charles Taze Russell used to preach that 1914 would be the end of all things. And then that didn't happen. So he just said, oh, well, I think I was right. It's just that Jesus did arrive invisibly in heaven. So they've just been saying this for over 100 years, and it's never been right. But it's hard to leave. They literally make it hard to leave. But also, they really do have nice promises that a person would want to believe in. And that's probably why Gage Flegel closes closes out his little presentation by reminding witnesses of paradise, the thing that is most appealing to witnesses. Probably not so much the creepy, sweaty rants that Gage Flegel goes on.
Just think of what this will mean. The deaf will hear and listen to the sounds of gentle rains, happy people, bird song, and beautiful music. The blind will see, examine starry skies, and behold rainbows. They will watch animals and children at play. Mankind will experience miraculous healing on a global scale. Those once disabled or elderly will hike through a forest.
Now, before we go, I'm really excited about this because I have wanted to discuss this particular nitpick for a very long time.
Why is it necessary to be so picky, to be so fussy?
There's lots of awkward phrasing in Jehovah's Witnesses' Bible, the New World Translation. One of my least favorite things about it, when I was a Jehovah's Witness, always felt awkward when I had to read this for a meeting assignment, is that the New World Translation renders this phrase that most Bibles render alas, or woe to me, as too bad. Just too bad.
They will stand at a distance because of their fear of her torment and say, too bad, you great city. Babylon, you strong city.
I feel like alas is such a stronger word that conveys the meaning. Too bad is what it says in Super Mario Sunshine when you lose a life. Why would anybody ever be screaming too bad?
Too bad. Too bad, they cry.
But in Revelation, it's all the religious leaders and merchants and politicians dying in this horrifying destruction, and the thing they're yelling is too bad? That's just lame.
And will weep and mourn, saying, too bad, the great city.
I'm bringing this up because they have to say it so much in this particular dramatic Bible reading.
Too bad, the great city.
Gage Flegel tries to perform these words, tries to give it the inflection that apparently the New World Translation Committee intended. But I think too bad sucks, and I think they should change it in their next update to the Bible. That's just a little suggestion from me, an apostate who was excommunicated from the religion. And that was it. I just have been wanting to talk about this for a long time, really since the summer convention, and just haven't really done it. I talked about it a little bit in that Jeffrey Jackson video. If you want to go back and watch that, I talk about this a little bit. Sorry that my eyes just stopped working and I had to only do voiceover.
Christ. Get out of her. Bad. Notice, should we ever have any doubts, remember the angel's words. These are empty promises. Bye.